the fact is it's also redefining what resolution looks like, because that doesn't mean we're solving problems overnight. To me, a resolution looks like, this is the problem, we've named it, and this is what we can do about it, and naming the challenges and getting it done.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hustle Up podcast. My name is Clint Crow.
I'm Jonathan Hessing.
I'm Matt Gammon.
And today we're sitting down with a very interesting guest here, Liliana Bakhtiari. Now, I'm going to give a brief intro. She's done a ton of social justice work. It says 20 years of experience on her webpage. I guarantee you should check that out. But for those who are just meeting you for the first time, can you give a brief introduction, who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Yeah. Hey guys, Liliana Bakhtiari. Thank you guys for having me on. Brief introduction. God, brief is not my forte, but
it doesn't have to be brief. Just jump in.
Yeah. So no, I have done social justice work, been involved in it my entire life. I was raised in it. My dad was a refugee, and his whole thing was, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, define social justice work.
So social justice work. Okay. So to me, it's like community service. I look at it like public service. So I have said that I've been in crisis relief work pretty much my entire life. And to me, crisis relief work is like that's political work, because obviously we're in a political crisis right now. It's going in volunteering. It's anything that, in my opinion, that I can do in service of others for, I don't want to say greater good because I feel so cliche.
Pushing the human species forward.
It's about, to me, combating apathy.
Okay.
And giving people and showing people that, the bravest thing they can do is feel. Because it is. Because we shut off so easily. Because this idea of caring about something outside of your periphery, like just outside of yourself, is it's overwhelming.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the age of information is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
So there's a reason that they say ignorance is a bliss. But I also believe that ignorance is a privilege nowadays. And it's a choice, and one that nobody can afford, because we're operating, we're running against a clock here, and it's running out fast. So the age of information. So anytime you turn on the TV, the selling point right now that mass media, besides like just opinion-based media, makes money off of is negativity, and we're really missing out on the hope market. Because to me, like hope, hope is
the hope market. I like that.
Because if you think about it, if we're talking about a capitalist society and making money off of something, hope sells, in my opinion.
It does.
And it also gets people motivated to make a difference. So in my opinion, there are people that benefit, a small group of people that benefit off of people remaining apathetic more than them getting involved. So for me, it's like people turn on their TV, they turn on they turn on news, or they turn on a podcast, or they tune into like Bloomberg News, or they get on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and it's just like all you see is just negativity or negative stories. There's not really solution based
Fear sells.
stories.
Yeah.
Right.
Fear sells. Yeah.
Fear, drama.
Exactly. And that's why the idea of what you call the hope market is the duality, like the other side of that coin, which is why that it's such a good term in my head, because if fear sells, then the duality is that there is a hope market that exists. It's just about getting it out there.
Right.
I used to work for an app company, and my biggest thing that I always wanted to develop was a Facebook for positivity. Like, you can't say anything negative. If you say something negative, you get kicked off the site. It's all positive information, positive influences, and lifting people up. And I think that would be huge, and I think people would buy into that.
I don't think negativity, or go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that, but the problem with that is, and because that's what I want to do for the Shouty app. Like, when I first rolled out that app, I wanted to make an app that was news for the people, by the people. It wasn't your big media companies rolling out their cameras. It was more of like a Snapchat type of way of capture the content from the people there. And then the question gets asked of, well, if you're filtering positive and negative, who are you to determine what's positive and what's negative?
So do you remember the Pixar movie Inside Out?
Yeah.
All the emotions, and so it's like sadness has a place. So it's not that we want to mute sadness. It's not that you want to mute hate, or not hate, but anger. It's that you don't want people to be complacent in those emotions. It's like, use it in a constructive way, because you want to feel sadness, you want to feel grief, like that. There's a value to that, and naming things that you're scared of. But being outright negative, or being outright like, a Debbie Downer, not coming to the table with something constructive, saying tearing down others, absolutely not. Like, combat that. But like, we don't, I wouldn't want to, I'd be very careful on how I muted certain emotions in discussion, because that's when we get into like erasing identities. And so that, but I see what you're saying, because what we want, like my goal in the work that I do is always, no matter what, leaving people with some sort of outlet where they feel like, outside of just liking something on social media or donating $1
Right.
to this, or buying some plastic piece of crap with save something on it, which I'm sorry, we can get into that later. That's bullshit. But like buy plastic to fight climate change. Are you kidding me? But you know, but the fact is it's also redefining what resolution looks like, because that doesn't mean we're solving problems overnight. To me, a resolution looks like, this is the problem, we've named it, and this is what we can do about it, and naming the challenges and getting it done, and that it's going to take time.
So my whole platform was just going to a place of positivity.
Right.
So you go there, you get uplifting encouragement and messages, stuff like that. It's just a positive place. You know, there's no negativity at all. So I hear what you're saying too, but there's also a time where you just want to go in your day, if you're feeling down, just to get some encouragement and some uplifting without having any hate or any negative to even look at. Like, I don't even like to look at it. Like, some of the people that are on my Facebook that all they do is negative or politics and arguing, I just like block them now. I'm just like, I don't even want to see it, you know, because I don't have time for it. It doesn't have time to go into my brain. I want more.
And it comes
positive
back to
energy.
that technique that we talk about on Instagram of unfollow all the Instagram models, unfollow all the funny meme accounts, unfollow everything that delivers bad news, and follow hashtag law of attraction, hashtag
Success,
entrepreneurship.
motivation,
Exactly.
any number of things.
To better yourself.
Yeah, curate your information that you're already getting on these platforms.
You mentioned not muting the sadness or muting the pain, and one of the ideas we keep coming back to is pain can be growth. There's beauty in the struggle. One thing that I'm wondering about is how do you deal with cancel culture? What do you think about cancel culture and this idea of actually not giving people a platform to hear sides or both sides, or even a full array of the information available?
Are you familiar with what cancel culture is?
I've heard of cancel culture, but honestly, I'm not super familiar. God, that's so unmillennial
So I
of
mean,
me.
you'll see it on Twitter the most. Somebody says something
That's
that
why.
Yeah.
and I don't get on Twitter, so you'll see somebody says something that offends somebody else, and they're blacklisted. They get no voice. They're taken off. And I see this as dangerous when you're only feeding one side of information. You get into an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, then you're giving up your amendments, you know what I mean? And then you don't have freedom of speech anymore.
Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram, Twitter,
So-
they all do it, and they do it
Oh,
differently.
yeah. It's all algorithms. They push their agendas.
Yeah, everything in today's world is very formulaic. The things that you take in is all formula based, which is very scary. But I would say with cancel culture and what you've just named to me, no, I'm not into that. I mean, I think that everything, obviously, there can be an upside to everything. But to me, any idea of muting someone in that capacity is extremely dangerous, because of the fact that taking away someone's voice when people's voices already feel so taken away anyways. And the fact is that energy can never be destroyed. It just shifts and changes. And so that you mute that person, they're going to come out, something else is going to happen. Things are going to continue to adapt. There's no such thing as completely canceling anything out. It's just going to take a new form in a new way. And on a new platform, something else will be created that'll come out again. So it's like cut one head off and 5 more appear.
Yeah.
And so, it's like a hydra of negativity. And so it's that to me, that's not effective. Instead of muting people, it's like, instead of just creating more symptoms, why not just cut to the root cause and actually talk about that? Why not actually feel and discuss and figure out like what it is that you can do? And that's and that's the point. It's
So what is that?
I think that's the problem. Is like, one, I don't have all the answers. I always tell people, like, I'm not the solution. I'm a part of it, as is everybody. And so I think what that looks like is being honest about what today's issues are. In Georgia, for example, one of the issues we're facing obviously is a healthcare crisis. We're facing an HIV and AIDS epidemic. So it's like talking about those things, figuring out what the root cause of that is, figuring out why a child born in poverty in Atlanta has a 4% chance getting out of poverty. And basically, if you're born a child of color in Atlanta and poor, then you're going to die that way. So it's also like taking a look at that and then figuring out why that is. So it's like, okay, so that begins to tap into issues around education, around sustainability, around infrastructure, around the prison industrial complex. And then like, okay, if we have these things, how do we begin cutting at the root of that?
That's the important part, is because that's the whole shift here is you're going to have your communities of online people saying positive and negative things, but where are the calls to action? Where, like, I can be in a Facebook group, support Australia, but how can I actually support Australia? And other kind of variations of that idea of how do you call people to action who have voices online? How do you call them to action in the physical?
I think a lot of it is this. So like, I've been working on this concept. I bought a bus during the gubernatorial race, like when the Republicans came up with that deportation bus. And so I bought a bus and I turned it into the anti-deportation bus, and we did like a message of hope on it to take it around the state to get people just out to vote, not for one side or the other, just like telling people, get engaged. And the whole thing I wanted to do with the bus after that was turn it into a mobile advocacy center, because this expectation of expecting our vulnerable populations to come to us for help is absolutely, it's ridiculous, because that's not going to happen.
Right.
And so the whole concept was taking the resources to them, taking people to them, and figuring out what people needed and humanizing the story. So I think like with something like that, it's what people ask me all the time, and what the goal of that concept was, and creating a video series from it, creating a podcast from it, was showing people like, to make the difference, you actually have all the tools you need. I come from nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have money. I didn't have a name before I ran for office. Kind of still don't. And I don't have the grooming or education for any of this. I have the experience, but because I went through hardship. And so the whole thing is showing people like, just rethink your social network. My greatest gift is networking. And that was born out of a coping mechanism to survive. I had to network to make it, to like get food on the table, to find a place to stay, to find a bed to sleep in. Like I had to build a community around me wherever I went in order to survive, because I didn't have any money or support. And so it's teaching people how to rethink their social groups, because everybody is a survivor of something. Life isn't easy. So everyone has a skill set. Everybody has a talent. Everyone has something that they can teach you. So how do you use that? How do you talk to the person next to you and think, what can we do to make a difference? It's getting people to understand that there aren't gatekeepers to change, not to make other people that, but understand that you are empowered to make that difference. You don't have to run for office to be the trailblazer. You can be the person running field or helping to raise money or making calls or anything like that. You don't have to be a wildlife expert to make a difference in Australia. There's a number of other things that you can do.
Right.
You don't have to be the one in the spotlight. Actually, probably the most powerful people are the support systems that are behind the curtain doing the real work.
I agree with that.
There are a million different ways to serve a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most fascinating things to that point about you is you're not just sitting stateside observing these things. You're actually out in the world, going to do archaeology in Kenya, going to work with sex trafficking victims in Europe, and working with kangaroos in Australia. Like, you're actually out there. And so let's talk about some of those experiences and what prompted you to go out there and, for each individual thing. And what did you learn from those experiences?
Well, I actually ended up, so I've always wanted to travel. It's what I've wanted to do since I was a kid.
Travel bug.
Like, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
I've been obsessed with the Amazon since I was like 5. But I started backpacking on my own when I was about 20. It started with me doing political marches in France, and then I came back, and then I did an archaeological excavation in Kenya, and did that for about 2 months.
What was that like?
I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere in the birthplace of humankind, with some of the most isolated tribes in the world, and it's
Culture shock to the max.
It's like it feels like you're coming home, and also you're surrounded by extreme poverty at the same time. We were staying with a tribal group where the concept of rape didn't exist. A man had a right to show a woman that he was interested in her by taking her, and that started as young as 11 or 12. And so that was a shock. And female genital mutilation was very much a thing in that tribe. And I remember the women asking me there, I was doing an interview with some of the tribal women, and they asked me if that happened with women in where I came from. And I said, no, that happened with the men. And they thought that was the funny, women don't get circumcised, men do. And they thought that was the most insane thing they'd ever heard. Yeah. And just died laughing.
Wow. They all speak English?
No, so they spoke Dasanech, so it had to be translated, and that's language endemic to only that tribe. So they are the only people in the world that speak that language. So it had to be translated from that to Swahili to English.
Yeah, there's over 30 languages in Africa.
Wow.
Or more, actually.
Way more. And so, that was that communication. But I did that. I was there, and then after that, I ended up buying a one-way ticket to Cambodia, and I did a field study with Northern Illinois University on the effects of the Cambodian genocide on Buddhist culture, and I did that for about a month.
Can you tie that together? Like, what does that mean?
So like I went out I went to Cambodia, and it was actually during the war tribunals, which is when they were finally putting on trial the people that were involved in the genocide.
Okay.
Well after it happened. In fact, the leader of that genocide, he died a free man, and so he was not involved in that.
How many people died in that genocide?
Oh God,
Is it quantifiable? No.
And new bodies wash up every year in the killing fields whenever the Mekong River
This
floods.
was Khmer Rouge.
Khmer Rouge, yeah. And
well,
so
same with Kenya too, with Idi Amin and Uganda, and I mean they used to come in and just cut up tribes, take the women, rape the women. I mean it was brutal.
Yeah.
And so I was going out and working with the monks like out in the countryside every day.
Yeah.
So I would go with them on alms rounds, which is when they go in the mornings and do prayers and bless people, and in exchange the villagers would give them food. And they would go and just do that barefoot and go on their rounds. And then I would stay with the villagers and I would actually interview them on what had happened to them during the genocide. So some of them pretended like it never happened because they were still scared. And others brought me into their home and told me the stories of how they lost their family members, and they showed me the scars on their bodies where they were beaten. And
how did that affect you? Like,
I believe that the most intimate thing a person can share with another person is their story.
I think so too.
And
that's powerful.
So the fact that these were people that were welcoming me into their home and showing me these, it was, you feel all of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also feel like the amount of positivity and resilience they had because they were so proud of the fact that they had survived and started a family and had these kids of their own. And it was different in the country than it was in the cities. There were some people who still were just absolutely broken in the cities. And in the cities, you saw a lot more poverty and you saw a lot more issues. There's a huge
More
amount
violence.
of trafficking in the city.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult. And going to the killing fields was really, I mean, there's multiple killing fields in Cambodia, not just one. There's one famous one, but there was many killing fields. And so I remember there was one period when I went back to Cambodia and I was actually building, I was working with this local family. Their names were Sapin and Mach, and they both spoke English, and they had started a school for kids there. That they're themselves to educate kids on English and send them to the city with scholarships, so there was no danger of them being trafficked, so they wouldn't have to work, so they would just have a stable living situation and money for school. And they would also build. They would also build like hygienic systems for people that were out in because I'm talking extreme poverty. Like they would build them like compostable toilets and new homes and things like that. So I did a couple of that. I built a toilet for one of the families, and we built a house for another, and we worked with the kids and did quite a bit while we were staying with them. But I was spending time with Sapin, who was the wife, and we were sitting outside next to this giant pond she had next to the house, and she said that was the house that she had grown up in. And she was telling me the story about, she said, do you want to hear my story? Like, not the story I tell tourists, but do you want to hear my real story? And it was just the two of us. And we were sitting at this giant pond that she had. And she starts to tell me about when she was a child, and she remembered the camps that were happening. And they were rounding up the families, and she was with her brother and her mother and her father and like her family. And her brother was a pilot and had been educated. And they, at that point in time, Pol Pot and his army were rounding up everybody and putting them to camps, and they were killing anybody who was formally educated. So in the morning they came for her brother, and he had a wife who was pregnant, and they came to take him away, and the mother like tried to run out after him, and she told me the story about how she saw one of the officers hit the mother in the head with a gun, the butt of his gun. She fell in the water, and her dad had to jump in and save her from drowning, and they dragged her brother off, and the last thing she ever heard him said was, look out for them, look out for my wife and my child.
Was this genocide? So like there's genocides that are based off cultures or religions. This one was based off having a certain amount of knowledge or intellect.
This was based off of Pol Pot's idea of year zero. He wanted to create he was a communist. He claimed to be a communist. He wanted to create an agricultural state. He wanted to erase the history and all the formal education to create an equal ground, like start all over and have everyone, based in agriculture only. Okay. And created this was actually spearheaded by bombings by the U.S. because of the Vietnam War. It all started around the time the Vietnam War was taking place, because Cambodia sided with Vietnam.
Some of your scariest villains are leaders who they might be evil, but they're principled people, and they've got some method to their madness. Is Pol Pot's conviction driving everybody back to some state of equality? Or
I mean, the man was obviously not completely sane,
Yeah.
but was educated. And from what I learned and what I know, it was just this idea of like, in his mind, I'm sure equal opportunity, but I'm not going to speak as though I know a great bit. I only saw the effects of what he did. There's not a single Cambodian person that didn't lose somebody to the genocide.
Wow.
He destroyed an entire country with the full knowledge of the West, like with the Western world absolutely knowing
And
what was
mostly
going
it's
on.
just power. At the end of the day,
What'd you say?
Mostly it's power, like Hitler,
Yeah.
power, Idi Amin, power. At the end, they're power-driven, crazy people that just go and kill anybody in their path that don't agree with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, Henry Kissinger was the person that oversaw the bombings and knew what was going on. Like, you know, it's there are plenty of things that we don't understand that are highly complex that people did for greed purposes only.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did that every single day for a month, and yeah, it affected me deeply. But Sapin continued to tell me what happened to her after the story of her brother. She talked about how she managed to dance and survive, and like how she survived. She was separated from her family, basically. But after the war, she actually was reunited with her father and some of her other relatives. She actually saw her dad on one of the infomercials Cambodia was using. She said, farming, trying to put out to the world that everything was okay. And she said what they didn't show was the bottom half of his body while he was farming because his legs were shackled. And so she said that she ended up marrying Mach, and they came back to that house, the one that we were staying at her with, and she poured into the pond, and she said, "Do you see this?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was a bomb crater that she had turned into that beautiful body, like into a giant beautiful pond that her kids and people would come swim in when they would come over. And so to her, that was a perfect symbol of the transformation that took place. And she was crying while she was telling the story.
Wow.
And like why she was doing the work that she was doing, and sitting there telling me about the death she experienced and how she barely survived and everything else. So those were the stories that I would hear every single day. And for me, it's like, if you can live through it and you have the bravery and the vulnerability and the compassion to share it, then the least I can do is listen to it.
Listen, right.
Do you ever have nightmares about that? Because I know when I went to Uganda and they told me the stories and I would see the scars, it wasn't just little scars. It's like they're mutilated. You know what I mean? And like it's stuck in my head. And some nights I just have horrible nightmares about it, you know? And I didn't know if you experienced the same thing or if you're able to block that out and sector things. It's not, sometimes it comes back to me.
It's not so much block because I remember all the stories. Like I witnessed a woman getting beaten by her husband when we were in Kenya.
Dang.
And so like I can still hear that.
Yeah.
And I had to get involved, and as a result he ended up losing his job. That was a horrible situation because it was like I had to report it, but at the same time he ended up losing his job and she was still stuck with it. Was like I was only 21. I didn't know what to do. And you know, some of the stories, like working with some of the young girls who were raped and had to sell their virginity to take care of their families because they had no money. I worked with a lot of this one. I watched a woman bought and sold, and I couldn't do anything about it. I watched a man pick her out of a book and a pimp bring her later. You know, so these are things that I witnessed. Kids living on a garbage patch, like a giant garbage dump outside of Mae Sot in Thailand, that were all Burmese refugees that were born and raised there and had these lesions on their skin and didn't even know what the concept of a home was. And it's things that stick with me but make me understand that, you know, it's by some, I don't know, you call it by the grace of God, you say karma, you say by luck, whatever have you, that I wasn't born into that. It's just chance that wasn't my reality.
Well, being in that environment, did you take special safety precautions? Yes, I'm assuming you're going to new foreign countries alone, and that could be dangerous, right?
Safety precautions. No, I didn't have mace or anything on me. My mom really wanted me to you know, hide my hair at all times because she was like, someone's gonna grab. I was like, this is ridiculous. She was like afraid that someone was gonna grab my hair and just drag me off into wherever. I mean, there were some close calls. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
When I was in Kenya, I had a man try to follow me to my tent because I told you that mentality. And I had to handle that situation. There was a time in Vietnam where I had a pickpocketer. I was trying to protect these drunk women that were wandering around after curfew, and a pickpocketer came after me with a brick in his hand. You know, there was another time where I ended up I got stranded on an island, and I had to pay to have a fisherman take me after hours across like across the ocean to the mainland.
Where was that?
That was in Thailand. I was trying to get to Bangkok because this was my card. I had lost everything, and so I had no money, no anything. I was trying to get everything shipped, and they couldn't register the address I was at because it didn't really exist.
Oh wow.
So I had to find a way to get back to a city, so I could get my cards and everything shipped to me. But so like precautions, like let's just say that if I ever have kids, I don't think I could because they would just live in a bubble. Because if my parents knew half the things that I had almost happened, I think they would have a heart attack.
Safety second.
Yeah. So there was definitely very close calls and definitely things that happened that were unsafe. So no, I didn't take precautions because I was backpacking by myself. Sometimes I was working with organizations on the ground. We were working in hotspot zones. That's just kind of the nature of the work.
So how are you affording this travel, the lodging and stay while you're there? Obviously you're doing some service work. Are people putting you up? Are you with organizations?
People were putting me up. I was with organizations. And there's also something when I was in Australia, there was something called helpx.net where I just people talk about woofing, but HelpX was different. It was like you could do anything from harvest fruit to work at a kangaroo orphanage to offer to help clean a boat to go sailing, all these different things that could get you from one place to the other. And so I backpacked Australia pretty much like completely just by working my way through. But I would also just sell everything I have at different times and work my ass off, and then I would just sell everything I had and then just get myself over there and get the work done because I'd already connected with organizations.
We've got a question from the audience, but real quick, I do want to know, what is woofing?
Do you know it's woofing is like when you can go and you can do farming in exchange for
housing. So HelpX is helpexchange.net.
Yeah,
like
but
help
it's like
X.
help. It's like the word help, the letter X.net.
Bet.
Yeah, and I loved it.
Young Karma.
So Tony Bari is asking, is it hard to not hate the people that hurt the people that you're trying to help?
So to repeat that question, Tony Bari asked, is it hard to not hate the people that hurt the people you're trying to help?
Yeah, it's definitely hard not to feel hateful and to recognize that you've played a way into that system, because the evil brilliance of capitalism is that it makes everybody in the world a stakeholder in the planet's destruction and the degradation of others. So like by me wearing this, it probably took about 1,800 gallons of water to make my jeans, and somebody somewhere in the world suffered from that. Everything I do, by being a privileged person, even though I'm a person of color, even though I'm queer, even though I'm a minority, I'm still privileged. And so like everything that I do takes away and takes a toll and has probably killed people in other countries, because that's the nature of globalization and the way this works, unfortunately. So yeah, did I feel hate? Like were there nights I just like could not stop crying, or I was just like felt almost completely broken by it? Yes. But what inspired me and what has continued to inspire me time and time again is that connection to people and their ability to be resilient through it. Because the people there that actually suffered it had found hope. They like, for example, the Cambodian, the Kenyan people, the Vietnamese, all these people I had met, their resilience, their kindness, their positivity, their ability to keep on going no matter what. Who would I be to hate the people that had hurt them when I hadn't even been the one to suffer through it? So I took that and I said, how can I use what I have to give you a platform, rather than speak for you, but give you a platform to like speak for yourself. So when I came back from all those travels, I did a lot of work here to raise money for those families there. Like I managed to raise money for that Cambodian English speaking school. I raised enough to rebuild part of their school, put people in touch with them, rebuilt part of their school, gave them enough money to have scholarships to protect some of those girls that were going to be going to university in the city. So I did things like that. I took that frustration I felt and I just put it into something constructive and said, like, how can I do something? Like, how can I connect people to this? How can I humanize it? How can I make this something that people can understand and want to and plug into and give them and inspire them to do something about it?
And how did you do that?
When I got back the first time, I started an organization called Barefoot Gypsy. And because my whole thing was every person's a survivor and every survivor has a story to tell. So I started doing events around the city, whether it was a drag show or a comedy show or a haircutting competition, or I once did a longboard competition down North Avenue where the old Masquerade used to be, and I got that street shut down and we did a longboarding competition.
That's what's up.
And I would get almost everything donated. raise that money, and then go donate it to those different organizations that I worked with overseas.
That's awesome.
And it was shortly after that, because I was doing that and it was helping 20, 30 people at a time. But I was like, I would put in all this work, and then that would happen. And I was like, well, legislatively, I have to be impacting legislation. That's what actually affects everything. And I need to be doing it here so I can build.
Here being Atlanta.
Let me build a strong foundation at home so that I can build my influence and do more, not locally, nationally, internationally.
Absolutely.
And so that's what the mission became. It was just like, how can I raise my profile? How can I work with others? How can I use what I've learned, use the compassion I have, use the skill set that I've built to begin impacting others in a positive way, on a greater scale. How can I do more?
So how do you define positive? Because it's a very subjective word.
Yeah,
So what is your definition of positive?
It's subjective. It's it differs from case to case. So if it's let me think. Let's take the healthcare situation, for example. Whether that's actually, no, scratch that. I define positive as, for me, the goal, would be, like what I said earlier, combating apathy. Apathy to me is the enemy of all of this. People unplugging, people not caring, people not getting involved, and not feeling empowered to make a difference. The more disconnected people are, the less impact they will have. Because everything that we talk about, like what's happening politically in this country, what's happening with all these situations, yes, hate it, I get it, you're frustrated, you're mad, you're pissed, you start lashing out at each other because you don't know who else to direct that energy towards. But all of those changes, everything that we hate about it, it's going to continue to happen whether or not we're at the table.
Right.
And I get people that say they want to tear it all down, sure, but that's not tomorrow's reality. So what are you going to do? What are we going to do in the meantime? Because right now you're lucky enough to have air in your lungs, and you're not lucky enough to see tomorrow. So what are we going to do to make things better? Because that opportunity is very much there. And so we can always be working towards that. And there are lots of things to be hopeful for.
Yeah, absolutely. We got another question in from our live. The question comes in and it says, "Are you happy?"
That's a complicated question.
And I've got a piggyback to that afterward too.
You're going to find, my experience has been that anybody that's in this line of work has undergone quite a bit of trauma themselves. I am no exception to that.
Yeah.
I have, unfortunately I've been subject to a lot of really horrible things. It's probably one of the reasons I'm able to do this work effectively, because I speak from a place of experience, whether it's assault, whether it's homelessness. Those are all things that I've experienced firsthand. So am I happy? Yes. Do I have depression and do I struggle with my trauma and PTSD? Absolutely. Because there is no such thing as a utopia. So yes, mental health has become a really big part of my regimen. This morning I woke up, I did breath work, I did meditation, I did yoga, and then I went to therapy.
What is breath work? So let's talk about some of those coping mechanisms. And then to caveat off that, I know you had a backpack question too, but just to immediately address this, breath work, meditation, what was that like? And then also to just real quick after that, what was your experience with the Buddhist monks like? Because I'm super into Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. I know these guys are too, and I know a lot of our listeners are too.
Yeah.
What are some things you've learned from them? And then also, what are those coping mechanisms that you use for those mental?
Yeah, so breath work, obviously, there's an app on my phone called Breath Work, and I practice different breathing exercises in the morning that help get me really centered. Meditation, I use simple habit, because obviously getting places to do this is not easy. I actually built a room in my house on my own to do all these practices for myself. So I have all these apps on my phone, and I allot myself an hour to an hour and a half every morning to get up and do these practices.
The power
before I start
hour.
my day.
So what are some of your favorite apps?
That's a
Just
good
for the
question.
listeners.
Simple Habit, Calm,
I love
Breath
Calm.
work.
Yeah.
There's a yoga.
Habit's
Let
good.
me just open my phone here and see what this yoga app is, because I don't remember the name of it. But you're talking to probably the most inflexible person on earth. It's trying to
There you go. No excuses not to do yoga.
It's like trying to bend a dead twig.
Probably close.
Daily yoga.
Hell yeah.
That's cool. So
And then also other things, I love skydiving. I love
Yeah.
dirt biking. I have a motorcycle that I do regular
Adrenaline
rides on.
junkie.
I'm learning how to sail. That's like one of my things this summer.
Yeah.
And so things like that also that get me outside. And yeah, adrenaline junkie because I love dirt biking because you can't think about anything else.
Well, I mean, just adrenaline junkie just from traveling
Yeah,
too.
that
You
too.
know what I mean? People don't understand how much adrenaline that packs when you're going through a place that you know nothing about, and you know that any moment they can just take you for whatever reason. The government can just be like, yeah, I don't like we got stopped going down the road in Uganda, and we had to pay off the police guy just to go, or we were all going to get locked up in jail. And it's like, we didn't do anything. We're driving down a road.
I've seen
he's
that
like,
some-
he's
yeah.
like, yo, then pay me or you're going to jail. I mean, straight up. It's like, all right, here's the money. What else can you do? You can't
Right.
do anything.
Well,
So-
I think also, like, you know, you can either be anti-war or pro-peace, right? And so when you're trying to quit something or get over something, you shouldn't focus on defeating that, but learning new things. And I think you actually said this and used this example once. Like, if you want to quit smoking, don't focus on quitting smoking. Focus on learning a new habit.
You're putting
Right.
all of that energy into the negativity. You're putting a negative spin on it. I'm going to quit smoking. You're putting that energy toward that thing you're trying to quit. And I don't know, maybe some people do it that way, but rather establishing
Right.
good habits that are at odds with, you know, for example, smoking or eating cookies or eating cake or whatever it is.
Yeah. And this is not to say like, you know, this isn't always easy. Like the question, are you happy? Like it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
I've worked very, very hard to get to a place where I can do this work and also be fighting to be in a healthy mental place. And like I had a relapse just last year because full transparency, I got assaulted last year after losing 5 of my friends to cancer, to hospital mistakes, to other things, like people that were all under the age of 30, and that took a huge toll on me.
Wow.
And so those types of things, you know, they take a toll on you. And to be effective in this work, I have to take care of myself mentally, or I'm good for no one.
Yeah.
And another thing that pulls me out of that depression when I get there is like going and doing service work. There's an organization called All Hands Volunteers. When there was flooding in Louisiana not that long ago, I signed up with them because it was just like all I had to do was get myself there, and they provided a place to stay and food. And I spent days gutting houses that had been affected by flooding and getting to meet the people that are living there. And doing that service work got me out of my head and reminded me of like what was really important. So those are my ways of coping with that.
And I don't want to, so before I say this, A, I don't want to discredit the emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
And B, I don't want to discredit the viewer who asked the question, are you happy? But when you're doing this kind of work, I'm going to argue that it doesn't matter whether or not you're happy. Are you fulfilled?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what has kept me going. This is what gives me drive and purpose. It's what has pulled me through everything is a desire to do this work. I'm working on a number of projects right now that are actually beginning to take off, that are making me extremely fulfilled, because it's seeing years and years of work that I have put in, and hearing all those people that when I was younger that were like very racist in this tiny little town I grew up in, that would tell me, my teachers, that would tell me I was going to be nothing. Like seeing all of that come and like not listening to that and watching all of my work and everything I've gone through come to fruition is like an extraordinary feeling.
Well, it's obvious to me, I'm sure it is to them, that you have purpose. You have a sense of purpose. You have a sense of direction. And I mean, we've interviewed a lot of people, and our primary focus is mindset, business, fitness, and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little off course from what we would normally do. And hearing your experience, your commitment to helping people in humanitarian work, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, you have purpose. You've got a mission. So what I'm curious about is, this was the last better part of a decade.
Mm-hmm.
What does the next decade look like for you? And what specific changes would you like, how would you feel successful if you made a difference in 3 key areas?
Those 3 key, so I ran for office in 2017.
What'd you run for?
I ran for Atlanta City Council, and when I started running, I had no idea I was the first out Muslim queer person to run in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So it gained a lot of national attention. I plan on doing that again, because I actually was the closest race in the city. I lost by just under 2% to a 16-year incumbent.
When is the next race?
2021.
Are you going to run on that platform?
I'm going on identity politics. No.
Okay.
No, I don't. I'm going to run on the issues of what are that. That was what I became clickbait titles. It's not what I
Sure.
chose.
Okay.
But every time people ask to do a story on me, I use that as an opportunity to bring it back to my platform issues around sustainability, around access to sustainability, around infrastructure issues, around affordable housing, around workforce development, around combating the prison industrial complex, around issues surrounding racism and segregation that we still face in the city. So doing that again, yes. I knocked over 16,000 doors in 8 months, and I plan on tripling that number. So there's there's not going to be a corner of my community that's left untouched. 2020 is also a huge battleground year in Georgia. I'm using this time to actually help a lot of people that are running down ballot, because last year I was one of the lobbyists for Planned Parenthood against the abortion ban. And I respect people's choices on anything. I will talk to you about any single thing you want to talk about. I don't believe in muting people out who have a difference of opinion, as long as you don't threaten me or my body, or anyone else, with bodily harm, and you don't become aggressive with the intention of causing me harm. We can talk about anything. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I did that was because I haven't been to a single part of the world where the treatment of women and children wasn't directly reflected in the health of the economy and the community. And that was when a person had a choice to do what they would with their body.
Can you draw that parallel out in an example?
When I was working, for example, in Kenya, these young women that were getting raped at the age of 11, 12, that were becoming impregnated and taken out of school and not being allowed to return, it was shorting them on educational opportunities. It was shorting them on the ability to build any type of infrastructure. It was, that the community had been engaged in a 50-year war, and it was directly reflected in the way that they were treating their women and their girls and their future the future generation. You don't take care of your kids. You don't take care of the women that are supposed to be nurturing those kids.
You just care about war.
Then you're not gonna see you building any type of future. Mm-hmm. And we cannot keep doing that. It's also why don't we also focus on cradle to grave? Why don't we, let's focus on educational opportunities. Let's make sure that our seniors are taken care of. Let's make sure our veterans have access to healthcare and to resources dealing with their with their mental trauma and their medical issues. Let's tackle homelessness. Let's make sure that we're doing things around expanding healthcare and ambulatory services and combating addiction to drugs rather than criminalizing poverty. So it's a number of things that we can choose to focus on. Mm-hmm. Adopting out the over 400,000 kids that are already in the foster care system.
Yeah.
Combating homophobia.
It way easier to do that.
And so these, so I was their lobbyist last session. I'm still working down at the Capitol, working on making sure that we're putting more people with more progressive values in those places. Flipping Georgia, because I'll be completely 100% honest. I don't like our president. That's just not, I'm a brown, queer Muslim woman from an immigrant refugee Muslim family. I have everything that I've seen in this administration tells me that I'm better off not existing.
What are some things that you've seen that make you say that?
The fact that my parents are Iranian and that they are Muslim. When the Muslim ban first happened, it affected my family. The fact that we see a person that's saying that immigrants don't belong here. We're not acknowledging the fact that everything that we've ever have been built on the backs of immigrants and people of color. The fact that we're not acknowledging that there should be freedom of religion in this country and not allowing it to happen, and labeling and encouraging the labeling of anybody who's different than us as an enemy and dehumanizing other people. My family's half Christian, half Muslim.
Yeah.
That doesn't take place in my household. That was not what I was raised to believe. And hearing that people that look like my father, that built themselves up from nothing, don't belong here. My father has saved and treated the lives of hundreds of people.
He's a doctor?
He's a pharmacist that worked in a part of the city that had nothing.
Wow.
And grew up and watched every single homeless person know my father's name, and watched him stop on the street to treat, to help them with their diabetes or to treat a wound that they had from it, and to help people who are suffering from HIV and AIDS by being a part owner of a hospice and working with them and delivering medication to people's households who couldn't get to where he was. Handing out food on the weekends to the homeless population, which he was allowed to do until, I believe, my mom said one person stabbed another one over some of the bread, and then my mom said, "You're going through the churches from now on and not doing it yourself."
So is that kind of where you got your inspiration from? Was your father, as far as his help with the homelessness and stuff like that? Do you feel like that was embedded in you at a younger age?
And my dad is my moral compass.
To your
Oh,
dad?
that's cool.
Yeah.
So what have you done with the homeless? Let's talk on that a little bit. Like, what have you done with the homeless? And
Right now,
because that's a big problem. I want to touch on that.
yeah, you
before.
have people in Atlanta. Atlanta, we have people who have claimed that Atlanta's not a lot with homelessness. I would argue that we haven't done anything around the homeless population since we gave them the one-way ticket during the '96 Olympics to get out of Atlanta.
What was that about?
During the '96 Olympics, they
Mhm.
gave many of the homeless population one-way bus
What's
tickets
the-
to get them out of the
like
city.
Wild
like
Wild
literal-
Country.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, like Wild Wild Country.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
With
really-
OSHA?
OSHA. Yeah.
Yeah.
OSHA, yeah.
OSHA.
Really good at sweeping issues under the rug and not dealing with them. And so in Atlanta, you have the number fluctuates. We shut down Peachtree and Pine, which arguably that shelter was doing a horrible job of taking care of the people that were there, but also it was the last block that was zoned to hold that many people. Peachtree and Pine was one that was the largest shelter in the city, and upon shutting it down, there were no other shelters built. Shelters shouldn't ask for money; they shouldn't require an ID because many homeless people don't have them. And so, like, it's all of these different things. We aren't doing anything around homelessness. What I would love to see us do, for example, Finland just did an initiative where they decided to house all of their homeless and just provide them with what they needed, and found that it cost far less to actually house their homeless population than to keep them homeless. You have places like Salt Lake City that actually saw their economy rebound about 30% after they housed their homeless population, because they had a lot of people that were able-bodied and had skills that wanted to work, and they found that once they gave them shelter and access to water, that they were able to actually hold down a job, keep it, and put money back into the economy.
What about all the companies and the nonprofits that are doing something about it and that are helping the homelessness? You know,
Name a nonprofit.
Change Humanity.
Yeah. So like Mad Housers, for example, is doing extraordinary work.
Yeah.
And them. So like, no, they are doing it.
So
but
I'm
until you
part
see
of
things.
Change to Humanity. So what we do is we feed the homeless every week.
No,
And
that's
we
awesome.
We come into Bankhead, and it's Giselle is the owner, and
Yeah.
she's the founder, and we help them in Clarkston. Bankhead and Clarkston's what we're focusing on right now, and of course we want to expand and do more and more, but you can only grow as much as you volunteer work will let you.
Right.
Whole Foods has partnered with us. They give us the food to give to the homeless people, so there is movement going on. I just think we need to be more aware and join forces, and then we can make
Instead
a
of operating
change.
silos. No, see, that's
Right.
what I agree with you on. My whole thing is like feeding homeless, awesome. Giving them blankets, awesome. Everything else, it's also making sure that we cut to the it's also making sure, like, what are we doing to actually provide them with shelter, because we have so many veterans or people on the street that, like, I worked with some veterans that all had VA funds, but they couldn't gain access because they didn't have an ID. They weren't from Atlanta, so they couldn't get their birth. So they didn't have a birth certificate here. So they would have to get one gentleman's from California, and it was going to be hundreds of dollars for him to find his birth certificate, get it here. And there are services that do that, but then finding the people that need the help, and then making sure and hoping that they're mentally competent enough to actually to work with you to figure out what that is. That's a whole nother thing. And so it's so many different issues that need to be tackled. There isn't a concise effort, and it's not being really spearheaded by the city, because the organization on the ground doing the work, awesome.
Right.
But why is the city not doing? To me, it reflects a gap that the city is not doing what it needs to do legislatively to get it done. So it's put the burden on the community to do the work to help the people that we've entrusted them to help.
So what are some
if the
ideas
city's
of
not doing anything? Then I think that we need to move forward and take it as a people and get the word out there. So what I'm saying is, let's make people more aware of this. Let's get volunteers ready to go, and that's what Change Humanity is all about. Hands of Atlanta, like, there's a whole bunch of them that are helping homelessness and poverty. But let's all make this a move forward. Like, what can we do to bring attention to this and to show people this is what we're trying to do? There's got to be companies that would love to back this.
Right.
Like Amazon. Thank God for Amazon and for Whole Foods for being able. I'm just saying.
I don't know about that.
I'm just saying for giving us food to give to them. I mean, because we wouldn't have it to give to them if not. You know what I mean?
Others would argue that the reason for the philanthropic fund, one of the counters of that has been, like, when they talk about the Bill Gates Foundation.
Right.
The foundation was created to solve the issues that they have played a part in causing.
Right.
But yeah, but I see what you're saying.
No, I get it. I get it in that part. And I'm not saying Amazon's a great company. We all know about Amazon. I'm just saying for this instance, thank goodness that they are able to give us good food to give to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And because they could say no and just throw it away and still
No,
write it
absolutely.
off. You know what I mean? So at least we got that little crack. That's what I'm saying. Not that they're the best company in the world, but at least they did something like that to at least try to help us, because they could say no and throw it away.
Yeah, at least they're trying.
At least somebody's trying, or at least that we're getting people involved, like Einstein Bagels. They give us bagels. You know what I mean?
Cool.
There's tons of other companies that could do it, is what I'm saying, though. It doesn't need to just be Amazon. And Whole Foods, this was before Amazon even took over Whole Foods. This started with Whole Foods, and then Amazon took it over, and I thought, well, there goes that. But thank goodness,
They kept it going.
you know, they kept it going. So
Let me ask you, that's very interesting, and it sparks in my head, like, the big disconnect is people doing the social justice work, but then staying away from the corporations when really we should try and find a way to bridge
that's what
it.
I'm saying. We need to bridge the gap. It's all about bridging the gap.
Yeah.
And that's what we talk about in Changing Humanity, is bridging the gap and getting people more involved in your city, in your neighborhood. It's in your backyard. You don't have to go to Uganda to find this stuff. It's downtown Atlanta. Go to Atlanta. Talk to some of these homeless
Hashtag
people.
hippie hustling.
Well, it's also equipping these people with, like, you know, with jobs, with skills, so that they, and many of them already do. Many of these people on the street are carpenters, they're plumbers, they have those
Some
skill
of the
trades.
smartest people I've ever talked to. Sit down and talk to some of the guys downtown.
Yeah.
You'll be amazed. I mean, it's just, some of them just blow my
Go
mind.
play a pickup chess game.
Yeah, for
And
real.
then-
Put 5 on it.
I got
But
5
doing
on it.
it's also like, it's not just, it's obviously giving, it's obviously feeding people, it's obviously helping them with whatever you can, but it's also like, how can we make sure, what can we do to do things like tackle affordable housing, tackle transit, make sure that you have a home, make sure that you have access to water, make sure that you don't have to pay some of the most expensive utilities and tax rates in the country that you do in Atlanta. All these things, like, how can we help you stand on your own 2 feet? How can we not just give you a fish but teach you how to fish?
So what kind of legislation would you lobby for to
That's what I
combat
was about to
some
say.
things?
Yeah, well, first of all, 70% of AMI, like area media income, is not affordable housing.
Say that again.
70% AMI, like what we currently define as affordable housing in Atlanta, is not affordable housing.
What does AMI stand for?
Area media income.
Okay.
So, like, it's not. So
Like Section 8.
that's not. That's not
Where
section.
people get it confused, though.
Yeah,
is with
and so
Section
it's
8.
not. So, like, that would be
Yeah.
like for people that are making, like, let's see affordable housing for people who are making $50,000 or less, because
Right.
a lot of our first responders are making that. Our
Yeah,
teachers are making
exactly.
that. So right now, 911 operators can't afford to live in the city. Firefighters can't afford to live in the city. Teachers can't afford to live in the city. The people that are the foundation upon which you are growing your city can't afford to live in the city.
Wow.
And so it's just like, Buckhead was having a crisis because they couldn't staff their retail locations because people that needed those jobs didn't live anywhere in the vicinity and the traffic was too much. So they couldn't even staff some of their locations because who was going to work there for minimum wage? And who was going to work, like, and they couldn't get there because the transit's not there. We are gridlocked. And so it's building that progress on clay legs. You can say that you're a world-class city, but if we're just protecting the tourist attraction that is the birthplace of the civil rights movement, but not upholding that in action and morals, in fighting for the people who are the roots of that, but instead of liquidating them and selling them off to the highest bidder, then tell me what the hell are we standing for? And I shouldn't be the one that's having to say this.
Yeah.
I want to, like, why isn't this being said by the very same leaders who's by the very same elected officials whose families were down there marching for and fighting for those exact rights, who our streets are named after, like, who we're learning about in the history books.
Yeah.
Why is it that we're still? Why is it that we see people benefiting off of keeping poor people poor? Because if Atlanta's a world-class city and you're talking about long-term sustainability, that is, you get that by investing in your local economy and investing into the people that build it, not by investing in the next big corporation that comes in town. Like, that all has a place. Like, I'd be all for Amazon coming here if they were going to do work on local workforce development and doing something around affordable housing instead of driving mortgages up 5 times higher.
Right.
Like, dope. Come develop all of it. I'm not anti-development. I am for holding developers to a higher standard. Put into the community what you seek to take from it.
That just gave me goosebumps. I love that.
So it's like, you want to come here,
Yeah.
you want to build things? I'm all for it. You want to come build a mass mall? Then let's talk about smart design. Let's talk about how we're going to be innovative and how we do that.
Yeah, smart
how are we
cities.
going to marry the local community with what you're doing so that you can have a long-term investment by building here, that you ensure that you have customers for decades to come. And at the same time, how are you going to do things like make the streets around you better, put in with sidewalks,
Safer,
affordable housing,
right.
safer? How are you going to do that? What money are you going to put into the local public schools?
How are we going to end sex slavery, and how are we going to end human trafficking? You know, because Atlanta, as you well know, is one of the biggest hubs for sex trafficking in the United States, right? It's a huge problem, and it needs to be dealt with. I love Ashton Kutcher and the End It movement, and he created Thor, which is helping take a lot of this stuff down. I don't know if you know what that is, but I think it's a huge thing. I think it's the biggest problem ever, and I don't understand how we cannot stop this. I just, it blows my mind. I think there needs to be more emphasis on this. I think it needs to be shut down immediately, and I think it needs to be definitely handled with more importance than it's being handled with right now currently.
To answer the question of how you end human trafficking, it's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
One that I struggle with because I've seen it. It's something that it's masterfully hidden. People believe that if you can't see something, then it doesn't exist. And a lot of the trafficking that we're seeing, and a lot of the kids that we're seeing that are homeless, that are depending on things like survival sex, which is where you exchange sex for a place to live, food, shelter, all of that. You're not just working for someone, you're just trading sex for those things to get by from day to day. A lot of that doesn't happen in the city anymore. It happens out in the suburbs, surprisingly.
Right. Yeah.
If there's going to be a combating of that, I mean, it's all you're talking about you're talking about also tackling issues that, again, the root cause of things, looking at education, looking at resources, looking at how we're combating things like domestic violence, how we're combating things like how we're ensuring that kids in the public schools, like in the public school sector, are having opportunities so they don't end up depending on this, so that you don't take resources, so a child isn't growing up in a neglectful environment where they're being abused, where they aren't being fed regularly, right, where they don't understand love and compassion, so that they become a product
Amen.
of the environment
Yeah.
that they've been living in.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had the teachers and the teachers I had when I was growing up, like there were a few key people along the way that took care of me, I couldn't tell you where I'd be right now, because I started self-harming in elementary school.
Yeah.
And I sure as hell hated myself for being gay. I didn't understand that I was different. I knew that I was, but I didn't get it. And I hated myself, and I hated my family, and I didn't understand what was happening. And that's what most kids face. They don't get it. They have all this anger, and they have all this pain and all this frustration, and all they want to do is be talked to and understood. And instead they're being met with hate and violence, because trauma is cyclical. And if you don't break that chain, and you're talking about something that dates back, you're talking like my parents both come from trauma. And so I've done a lot of work to try to break that cycle.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about something that when we talk about ending things like human trafficking, we also have to look at the root of it, not just dealing with it now that these people are older and in the system. How did they get there in the first place? Where's the pattern?
Like you said, I mean, you are a product of your environment. Your environment directly affects who you are.
And so it's dealing with a lot of these patterns. And that's why when you asked me what I wanted to affect, if we could look at education, environmental justice, and healthcare, I think these are three things that I want to begin tackling. Because never have I been anywhere in the world where those three things did not directly impact everything that we're talking about. To me, it's the foundation that all of these things are built on.
You said education, healthcare,
and environmental justice.
In your perspective, is it too broad of a generalization to say that there is an Eastern culture and there is a Western culture?
Very broad.
But do you agree that exists?
Yeah, I think it's more than those two things, but I think that those are two of the categories.
Okay, so using those two categories, because those are, what other categories would there be?
I mean, you want to talk, when you get into Eastern culture, then you have you have Middle Eastern culture, you have Asian culture, you have African. It's just like saying Georgia's not Florida, Florida's not Texas, Texas not Alabama.
Right.
Like that type of thing.
But then we're all American. Yeah.
Yes. But there's divisions. I'm just saying that I get what you're saying. I just wanted to clarify that because generalizations can be.
No, I'm glad you did, because that helps me understand the context. What is it that Eastern culture can learn from Western culture and vice versa? What can Western culture learn from Eastern culture to solve some of the problems you see in the world?
I'd argue that Eastern culture gave Western culture the legs it stands on.
Oh, for sure. But Western culture has also evolved in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Western culture can take from parts of Eastern culture what we see being held up with cultural identity and like the histories and the practices there, because I think that when you erase where you come from, you're more likely to make those mistakes again.
You can't forget about history.
You can't forget about history, because you have McGraw-Hill is one of the largest producers of public school textbooks.
Yeah.
And they're based out of Texas, and they're talking about erasing slavery from their books. Imagine if kids didn't know that existed. And you're growing up in a world where that struggle never took place.
What about taking down monuments that might have been for Civil War
Stone
generals? Mountain.
I mean, like I understand the fight behind that, and I'm all for it. But I'm also not for fighting wars against dead men who have already been here and wreaked the havoc and the prejudice and the racism that they've impacted on this world. And I'm for doing things now and today that are going to make them turn in their grave.
Okay. And so, I kind of feel like that's part of erasing history. Like, let's erase slavery in books, and let's erase Civil War generals.
I'm going to get into that. I will start talking about that the day that we have just as many monuments to MLK and to every other civil rights legend as we do to the white people that did everything to create a reason for them to exist in the first place. Build them up. You don't want to erase that. And let me see you put even more monuments of MLK, of Joseph E. Lowery, of Dr. C.T. Vivian, of Andrew Young, of our Congressman John Lewis, like and the women that also held them up. Let me see monuments of them and streets named after them just as much across the country as there are of them. If you don't want to tear them down, then build up the other culture too, instead of trying to erase it. But like I said, also, I'm not here to wage wars against dead racist white men. I'm here to make them wish they could come back to life and undo the work that I'm doing. I want them turning in their fucking graves. And so I want to be doing I want us to be building a legacy that succeeds despite the efforts that they put in place to make sure we did it.
It's kind of like come back to that concept of don't be anti-war, be pro-peace. Don't go blowing up the monuments in Stone Mountain, but build new ones that push more progressive. And
to be clear, I'm not here to tell people don't be mad about those monuments.
Yeah.
I grew up from Stone Mountain with kids with people that toted around the Confederate flag and said horrible things to me, and I saw the effects of that environment firsthand. So I'm not here to tell someone, a person of color, like that they shouldn't feel like they want to see those things torn down. That is not my place.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say, if we're going to have that conversation, before I will even have the conversation of if those things should come down, I want to see just as many. Let's put up just as many monuments then to Black legacy and history and to the civil rights and to those legends and heroes. Because until then, I don't see how there can even be a conversation. Does that make sense? Like, until that we see that built up, then, like, you talk about like what we have right now are people that are upset about erasing history and heritage. Okay, I hear that. But at the same time, you're talking about erasing the history of slavery and the civil rights movement.
Which is dangerous.
Correct. So until that's not a threat, and until we see that effort not being erased, then I don't want to hear about how the history of white America's being erased.
Get to an equilibrium and then have the discussion. Because
there's already attempts on a daily basis to erase the history of minorities.
Let's I got a question about, I still want to know about the tying into the Eastern and Western culture thing. What did you learn from the monks? I'm like super interested in this question, super into that, and I've always wanted to go out there and spend time with monks, and that's why I keep coming back to it. So what is some knowledge that you got from them that you could pass to us and our audience?
I mean, like the level of humility and simplicity, but like the complexity in that, like the amount of prayer and the dedication to studies and having that one thing that they were working towards. It is a very difficult thing, I've learned, to focus so completely on spiritual study and practice in the way that monks did.
Yeah.
Female and male.
Yeah.
We, as a Western culture, I think we all know this, like, we cannot... we do not know how to sit still and be still with our thoughts, be still with our trauma, be still with anything.
I'm over here twisting the top of a pen.
And so that was something that I really admired, was like the level of simplicity. And simplicity doesn't mean easy. Simplicity is actually extremely complex.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so seeing how they did that was really inspiring.
So what did you take and adopt that helps you to push what you want to accomplish?
I think that right now it's my attempts to actually make space for mental health and mental health practices. So
meditation, it all came from that trip.
That was a start, but that has taken years for me to develop and to value and to understand is more important than anything else.
So one of the questions that I wrote down from earlier was, how do you take care of yourself when you're spending so much time pouring into others? Self-care. And then do you ever get off purpose or burdened down by the weight of the tasks you're tackling? And to tie it all back, is the meditation, do you do anything else to practice self-care?
I mean, I like to go throw axes, and you like to go out.
Have you been to
dance.
Bad Axe?
I'm so good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I absolutely love doing things like that, being outside, doing, like I said, like going dirt biking, learning how to do paragliding, going mountain climbing, going rock climbing, going skydiving, doing all those being outside, going camping, backpacking,
Always doing something, consistent motion.
but also learning to be still, journaling, reading, doing my mental practices, going to therapy, but also feeling the grief, because I would just bulldoze through it and keep on going. And you asked me, like, how do I not, like, do those things still haunt me? Yeah, they do, but I put them off for years until it hit me all at once, and I almost broke.
So we talk about this on a lot of episodes, is therapy. And some people like, oh, I'm too good for therapy. I don't need help. Therapist is for weak people. And that is just cliche. That's not true at all. And we've tried to break that, I think, as a whole, as our podcast has gone on, is just everyone needs help. Michael Phelps needs help. What would you say about therapy, and how has it helped your life?
It saved me.
Yeah.
I would not be sitting here in front of you right now.
But how?
That's the
because
question.
like trauma was stored in my body, and trauma is cyclical, and we carry the pain of our community, like of our ancestors, our parents, and people
I
before
just want
that.
whoever's out there that's watching this, that's dealing with something right now, it's okay to.
Because you're doing it on an extreme level, so
I
if
had
you're
to,
able
yeah.
to, if you're
So-
able to deal with it, then any, I don't want to say anyone can, but a lot of people can. And so, like, I think what Matt's asking is, what are some of those tools in therapy that you use to get those toxins out of you?
So like journaling is a big one. Sometimes just like dancing, screaming, driving, these simple things, because anything to get that energy out of your body, because you store it. So it's like anything that you can, the things that you can do. I'm not Netflix and just like mute and like numbing out. That's not going to be the way to do it.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm binge watching Sabrina the second I get home, but like I'm talking about, you need to do things, whether that's going out into nature, whether you believe in God or not, whatever you may believe in, higher power, karma, whatever it is. I'm not here to tell you. I personally believe in God, but I'm not here to tell you what to believe in. Talk to that. Get these things out, whether it's behind closed doors, but you have to try to practice. And it's scary because sometimes we've gotten so good at numbing ourselves out that the thought of facing any of it seems like it would just kill you. It took me years to start journaling again because I was so afraid of what was going to come out on that page. And when it finally did come out, I cried for days. But that has to leave. It's taken me so long to understand that that has to work its way out of you, or you will not be able to move forward.
Do you do daily affirmations as well?
They're written on my mirror.
Yeah.
I got into Codependence Anonymous almost 2 years ago, and that's a 12-step program for people who identify as codependent. And that really helped jumpstart like a lot of the work I was doing in recovery.
What is codependence?
It's basically, there are different forms of it. Some people think codependent, like they cling to another person. There's also avoidant codependency. It exists in many different forms.
I
like
think a lot of people have codependency.
A lot of us. I mean, think about it. Listen to any song on the radio. Codependent. I catch a grenade for you.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're broken like me.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Like, it's very ingrained enmeshment and those types of
Absolutely.
things, and that type of that type of dependency and that type of seeking out validation from other people exists in everything. And it's a real addiction.
Expression, you're my other half, or you complete me. As almost as if
No, you
it's
should complete
giving
yourself.
credence. Exactly. Whole people should be with whole people.
Right.
And you shouldn't be seeking for completion or it's validation from an outside source.
Right. And again, years, like my dependency on people, because that wasn't something I got growing up, has almost destroyed my life many times. And so that's why mental health practices are very big for me now.
Partner that with your experience in travel. How long were you alone overseas?
My longest trip overseas at one time continuously has been about seven and a half months.
Yeah.
And that was spanned over many different countries. And like, it was I traveled between different groups, and a lot of it was spent isolated. Like I backpacked Australia by myself and all that. So yeah, I mean, traveling, people think it's running, but honestly I think it was Mark Twain that said traveling is fatal to to closed-mindedness, prejudice, and bigotry. And because you are left with nothing but your own thoughts, and you can't, everything familiar is gone, so you don't have those coping mechanisms, so you're left to face everything.
One thing I wanted to ask you too is, like, how did you move through all these different arenas with different languages? And because that was one thing that I really struggled with, like going over to Uganda and everyone's speaking so many different languages. You start finding other ways to communicate with these people. How did you find ways to communicate?
I would say that one of my greatest assets and survival skills / coping mechanism is human connection. So it's that ability to like find something to connect with someone on, because I've been in situations where like if I hadn't found somebody to connect with, I like you know, there was one night where I got stranded in a part of Australia, an area that like rape was heavily happening, and I didn't know that. It was like 2 a.m, and I was trying to get back to this hostel, and I friended a guy who we took turns like walking and keeping lookout and managed to get to where we needed to go. So it's like you know, those types of situations where I would find somebody, we would friend them. One time I got stranded outside of, nobody told me that Adelaide at the time was the murder capital of the world, I think. And nobody told me that their airport wasn't open overnight. And I got my flights mixed up. So my friend wasn't there to pick me up and couldn't come. And so I friended these 2 people, and we took turns in shifts sleeping outside of the airport watching our stuff.
Wow.
So it's like finding people and finding ways to do that. But in Vietnam, I got lost and thankfully found a postcard of the place I had been at, like a landmark, and I communicated with the driver and like found my way of getting back that way. And just being really resourceful, talking to whoever I can, finding work, like, you know, just picking up on certain things. You find very creative ways of communicating with people, but what I find more so than anything is like local people just, they really do want to help. The number of everyday heroes I've met abroad is extraordinary.
Well, that could be also, since you say you believe in God, that could be God guiding you and looking out for you as well, or higher power, or being
like, or if you create your reality with your mind. I was about to make that point too. It's so funny you said that. Like, do you think that if you were maybe in like a lower frequency, fearful state, you could have manifested something?
It's, you know, like how they say, like when you get into any 12-step program, or you try like trust in the process, you cannot, when you travel, it's just like anything in life, you have no control over it. You have control over your own actions. So like going abroad, I had one idea of what I was going to do on a trip, and I would find that, you know, bizarre travel plans are just dancing lessons from God. So like you don't, like I didn't know. I would go in with one thought, and I would find that my world would be completely flipped upside down, and what I thought was going to happen did not happen at all. Wow. And I would just have to be open and adaptive and not panic and have to figure it out. And that can be said for anywhere, here too. But like traveling, when everything that you have is everything familiar, your family, your phone, everything is gone, you have to be especially adept in those situations. But it's so worth it.
Yeah, I got one more question because we're running low on time. First off, this has been amazing. My last question, though, is I am not 100% sold that dinosaurs existed in the way McGraw-Hill shows us. There we go. Right? So doing archaeology in Kenya, what did you learn? Because I feel like, because I heard on a podcast once that it's like these bones are shattering, and it's like taking a toilet from a 100-story building, dropping it and reassembling it into a toilet. But then there's people that are government paid to put it together, so they essentially have to come up with something. So from someone who actually has been there doing it, what do you think?
Well, my excavations were different. We're talking about the Holocene, so we're talking about area like time that around like 10. Thousands of years ago, not dating back to where I'm talking about. Like I was looking at Homo erectus prints. Okay. So I was finding things from like what's called the footprint site in the Galanaboy Formation, and finding things like proof of early domestication by finding bovine, which are like cows like hemimandibles, like their jaws, and finding proof of eggshells, like ostrich bead eggshells, which showed signs of trading, and signs of charcoal, which meant fire. And so it was showing signs of early domestication of certain, like settling of certain areas, and early domestication of certain animals.
For shits and giggles, where do you stand on dinosaurs?
I mean, I think dinosaurs existed.
They definitely existed.
I don't know.
What do you think existed instead of dinosaurs?
I don't know. I'm saying I don't know.
Come out of nowhere.
Dude, they grow like trees, bro.
That Brontosaurus was a tree, but
no, I don't think they existed. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a perspective.
You're telling me the land before time is a lie.
Have I seen chickens?
Yeah, like a chicken, like a rooster.
Yeah,
it's a little dinosaur.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be.
Birds arguably get 2 things from dinosaurs:
hollow bones.
No. Scales.
Okay.
Claws.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Just something I heard. I'll neither confirm nor deny my position on dinosaurs.
I believe dinosaurs definitely existed.
I mean, I can't tell you how they existed. I can't tell you any of that. I wasn't.
You don't know how their societies worked?
No, I don't know how their societies worked. It's only speculation. But I mean, do I think dinosaurs? I don't believe land before time was a lie. You can't take that away from me. That's like
what about Jurassic Park?
I love Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
Well,
Jurassic
cool.
Park.
Well, I agree with something you said. Like, is that you can't have an out of mind, or out of sight, out of mind mentality, and that happens in America. Is, oh, I don't see it, so it's not real. Or, you know, people get too involved in putting their perspectives on social media and don't take action. So just quickly, so because I want to make this some kind of good clippable content, what are 3 steps somebody could take to getting involved in creating a social impact?
Like that.
And well, here's some examples I've seen in my community. Forming a study group, so people that actually meet weekly to talk about what's been happening, the most recent impacts of what's been going on, whether it's locally, nationally, statewide, internationally, so that you're actually up to date on what's occurring. Creating, you know, getting involved with different organizations. I can guarantee you that there are so many organizations on the ground that are doing the work, like the one that you named earlier with combating
Change
homelessness.
humanity, yeah.
And so there are so many nonprofits that are on the ground that have been doing this work for years that are always in need of help. So it's familiarizing yourself with what's happening in the community. And that's the beautiful thing about things like Google, is that you can search that and find out what's going on.
So familiarizing yourself in your community, getting involved with pre-existing nonprofits, and what would a good third one be?
The biggest thing is human connection. Like,
Yeah.
don't go to you don't need to be on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, all the time, but like, meet with your community, go out there, actually walk around, talk to people, find out the history of the communities that you lived in. A lot of people don't know Reynoldstown was the first neighborhood established by freed slaves. A lot of people don't know that, you know, Cabbagetown was started by white, poor Appalachian people.
Yeah.
You know, so this, like, you know, learn the history of where you're from, or like where you're staying. Don't think that something is inherently yours. And humanity happens when you listen, talk to people,
I love that.
connect with them. Like, there are things. I have people that now call me. I got in touch with a social worker that works for one of the local elementary schools, and she calls me now when these families are. I just got a bunch of furniture donated to a family that had nothing in their house in Section 8 housing. I just did a toy drive and delivered the toys myself Christmas morning to 10 families who weren't gonna have anything for Christmas.
And that's my whole thing. I feel like it's out there. You know, like, people have a bed, they throw it away. You know, well, someone could use that bed. You know what I mean? And that's the disconnect. It's like, someone could have come by and gotten that bed for you and taken it somewhere. You know what I mean? And I feel like that happens all the time.
If you see a gap in something, like what you just said, if you see a gap in something, find a way to create a solution to it. Like, whether, like, you know, create a marketplace page on Facebook and have people donate that there and match it with families who need something. You can create that gap. If you can't find someone who's doing the work, then start doing it yourself. But the only way you're going to find out is if you actually get out there and start doing it. If you live in Georgia, state legislature is in session right now, get down to the Capitol and just listen to what's going on. Go down there and check it out. It's actually really cool to get down there and see it firsthand. Go to a neighborhood meeting. Go to your local rec center. Whatever. Like,
Do something.
But get out there, and if you're always curious, like, you know, I'm sure that the guys will put my information up. You can message me on Instagram. You can message me on Facebook. You can email me.
How do we find you? Go ahead and say it.
Like Liliana.Bakhtiari on Instagram, and we'll have to put that out somewhere for them to spell.
It'll be in the description below.
So Instagram, Facebook. My email is liliana.bakhtiari@gmail.com.
We'll put your website in there too.
There are 1,002 ways to reach me. People reach out to me weekly asking for help or asking for advice or asking how they can get involved. I'm not going to be your gatekeeper. What I will do is help provide you the resources that you need to get out there and do it yourself. And right now I'm working on a number of different projects that once they go public, are going to help people do just that. Because I find more so often than not is that people need like a social justice how-to. Like a how-to series, and that's something I'm working on right now, because I don't want to tell people how to do things. I want people to realize that they're fully capable of doing themselves. If the weird queer brown kid that grew up first generation in Stone Mountain, Georgia, that ended up in Atlanta, can run for office and can do all this and with no money, with none of the grooming, from a shit ton of trauma. If I can do all of this after being told I was going to be nothing my whole life, then really anybody can.
Yeah.
I was homeless 8 years ago.
Wow.
Before I had the house I live in now. And so if I can build up all of that, anybody can do it. There's no secret to it.
Just hustle up.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we do work with a nonprofit called the Love Elijah Foundation. It's about bringing entrepreneurial resources to underserved youth. We're going to be doing a lot of things with them. Would love to collab with what you got going on that. We've got an event coming up next Tuesday. It's called Don't Wait for Tomorrow, Do It Today. I hope you can come. I'll send you information. Anyone listening to, go get your ticket. It's on our Instagram link bio, or this episode actually may not be out, but we do have events every Tuesday, or every last Tuesday of the month. Tune in. We always have awesome conversations. Liliana, this has been really incredible and different from any kind of conversation we've had yet. So I appreciate you bringing your perspective and your vulnerability to us.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot. I've been inspired. I want to find more ways to take action in my community. Again, that's what Hustle Up is about. It's not about just sharing ideas. It's about taking action on those ideas.
Yeah.
And the more we can do to get people to take action in any capacity of their life, especially ones where you have an impact on others, is a special thing that we love to promote. So,
And remember, like, the bravest thing, I truly believe that the bravest thing a person can do is care.
yeah.
And I really do believe, again, like I said this earlier, humanity happens when you listen. Go into every situation with the eagerness to learn, not to talk at someone, but to listen.
Yeah.
And understand that, yes, you absolutely have something to offer. Don't ever let someone make you doubt your identity, your story. You have everything you need to make a difference, but always go into a situation wanting to collaborate and understand others. Think about where people come from, learn where they come from, learn their story, work with other people, gain as much information as you can, get out there and learn, and don't go into any situation with one set concrete idea, because I guarantee it's going to change.
And don't let your circumstances overcome you. Go through your circumstances, overcome them, and learn how to be vulnerable and express them, such as you have. Thank you again so much. This has really been a special one. Guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, hit that bell. We want you engaged. For everyone who asked questions on our Instagram live, thank you so much for engaging. Anytime we go live, we encourage engagement. We want to build a community. We need everyone's help to do that. Guys, thank you again so much. Liliana, thank you again so much. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Clint.
I'm Matt.
Till next time, hustle up.